Let's talk about Potential Man and Taming Mahoraga, but spoilers beware. Okay, so first of all, in case you didn't see it, last week I put out a video talking about Mahoraga and how you might tame him, and specifically the fun fan theory about piercing ox plus the treadmill. So check that out if you didn't. But in response to that video, I got a couple of comments that I wanted to address that talk about Mahoraga and Megumi's potential. Starting with this one from Psycho Ninja, who says, "Y'all don't realize just how broken the Ten Shadows is." And he goes on to talk about maybe some of his strategies for how you would tame Mahoraga. But the first thing I want to say is I'm totally with you on how broken the Ten Shadows is. I think it's one of the most powerful techniques in the series. It's the only one that's been shown to kill a Six Eyes Limitless user not once, but twice, right? So I definitely think it's, again, not to be messed with, one of the most insane techniques, right? So it really just depends on who's piloting it. And that's not to take anything away from Megumi, but we obviously get a glimpse at its potential when Sukuna is the one wielding it. So I'm with you on all of that. As to how you could tame Mahoraga with it, though, we've talked about a few different ideas on the channel in the past, but Psycho specifically says this thing is designed to tame Mahoraga because there are all of the other Shikigami you have at your disposal, and that presents so many different things that Mahoraga will have to adapt to. Saying that, you're pinging him with all these things, he'll never be able to adapt to all of it. If you use it well, like if you're a special grade, you'll be able to tame him that way. And I obviously think it's possible to tame him, clearly, but I think it's a little bit easier said than done, because I think Mahoraga can adapt to 36 things at once if they're not all threatening him to a major level, right? It will just take some time, but I don't think he's limited by let's say only being able to adapt to 3 things at any given time. So you hit him with that 4th thing, it's going to be guaranteed, right? And this isn't even what Psycho was saying, but I know there was a lot of theories about like the 8 prongs of the Dharma Chakra wheel, meaning Mahoraga could only adapt to 8 things or stuff along those lines. And for all I know, could be true, but there's nothing that points to that being the case, in my opinion. So, let's say you have, Orochi the snake hitting Mahoraga, Nue hitting him with electricity, and, 15 rabbits all biting him or something. Yeah, that's going to be a lot for him to have to focus on, but none of those things are really that threatening in and of themselves that I don't think it's just as simple as summoning all 9 of the other Shikigami, or even summoning, like, a totality of the other 9, and that just being an easy way to defeat Mahoraga. I think there's other things that are going to have to come into play. But, we've never even seen some of the crazier potential totalities, so who knows what, like, a 9 totality Shikigami would even be capable of. Maybe it would have some ability that could theoretically just one-shot Mahoraga. But a couple of other things I wanted to address that Psycho says is that within the domain, all of the Shikigami are going to be enhanced and have sure hits. And I don't think we know that. Yes, they will be enhanced by just the general buff a domain gives you, but Megumi, at least in particular, does not have a sure hit in his domain because it's incomplete. So his Shikigami aren't sure hits. Now, would a theoretical completed Ten Shadows domain Shikigami have sure hits? Maybe. It would just depend on what the domain actually does, right? Maybe it would manifest in that way, and then sure, right? But at least in Megumi's case, he didn't have a complete domain, so no sure hit to speak of. But then one other thing that Psycho says is that Mahoraga could like just sink into the abyss of Megumi's domain, which we saw happen to people, right? And I think that's true, and at least for a time, Mahoraga would be incapacitated in that way, but he adapts. So Mahoraga would adapt to that abyssal Sato sinking and would eventually be immune to it. So you're always going to have this problem of the adaptations constantly moving the goalpost, right? So it's really about having something that can just completely obliterate Mahoraga in one go. And with the Ten Shadows, there's not really anything abundantly clear that's capable of that. Besides, the crazy piercing ox theories, or one thing I've posited is that in the domain, if Megumi could summon like tons and tons and tons of a single Shikigami, maybe he could summon enough new ways to just blast electricity. So I do think there are ways we can come up with, and again, the more specialized or more the better you are, I don't know if specialized, the better you are at sorcery, special grade, there we go. We'll probably be able to come up with some creative ways to do it. But again, I just think it's easier said than done, which is why, you know, the people we've seen kill Mahoraga are people that are doing it without the 10 Shadows and with other powerful techniques. But to circle back around, I absolutely think it's possible to tame Mahoraga with only the 10 Shadows, and it does just require a special grade level sorcerer, somebody who's going to be skilled and practiced enough and creative enough to use it in ways to get it done. And I think likely the domain expansion is probably the way that you're supposed to do it. But one thing Psycho says is, do I think that Megumi not growing up in the Zenin clan hindered his progress with the technique? Because we don't know if he would have had the same like guidebook compared to if he had grown up in that clan. And I don't think so. I think he was just fine, and for two reasons really. I think Gojo was a good teacher for him. And also, we know that all of the clans also have information on the other clans, right? And like we saw with Toji, he didn't know about the existence of Hollow Purple, but I think Gojo probably knew largely about the 10 Shadows for the most part, especially given the fact that the Limitless Six Eyes user and the 10 Shadows user in the past killed each other, and that almost certainly had to be from Mahoraga, that I think Megumi had a good enough guidebook to help him get going, plus Gojo as a mentor, plus the rest of the Jujutsu school to help him out, right? But even beyond that, I think the Zenin clan might have also just given him the resources he wanted should he have asked for them, right? Because we know that they still like valued Megumi as a 10 Shadows user. They knew how powerful that technique was, and he was a Zenin by blood. So I don't think they had just like written Megumi off, and if anything, probably wanted him to come back into the fold one day, which probably means they would have given him all of that type of stuff. And then coincidentally, I had another comment sent in from Melon here, which also discussed Megumi's potential. And he says that he was never meant to reach his full potential because Sukuna was always going to smother it, and brings up how Megumi's whole arc can kind of be encapsulated by Gojo and Sukuna's differing ideologies. The way that Gojo wanted to foster the next generation and have them surpass him, and he dedicated his life to that, versus Sukuna only, you know, ever caring for himself and fostering his own strength. This is why Gojo mentored Megumi, and it's why Sukuna used Megumi. And I love the way you painted just Megumi through that lens, because I completely agree. And I think that does speak to Gojo's character, something which we've talked about at length on this channel, that, you know, it says a lot that the kid that represents like everything, honestly, he should hate, right? The son of the kid that killed Riko and kind of shifted the balance of the Jujutsu world. The technique that has the only one to have ever killed a Six Eyes Limitless user. Like, he would have had every reason to just, if not straight up kill Megumi, like definitely distance himself and not help him at all, but he did, right? And that's because he chose a different path compared to Sukuna. So yeah, I love that, and I agree with that. I wouldn't say necessarily that Megumi was never meant to reach his full potential, because I still think, especially given the end of the series, with him being still alive, he can continue to grow and blossom, maybe one day surpass Gojo like he wished. But the point of the story wasn't to have, you know, Megumi reach that level, because instead we had it pivoted through Sukuna's plans for him, which I've talked about this before as well, but I thought was an excellent subversion of the normal shonen expectation. So yeah, I love what you said here, and I agree. Anyways, that's going to do it for this one, party people. As always, let me know your thoughts down below, and thank you for watching.